Since childhood, I have been fascinated with language. I've invented my own.
You invented an entire language?
Yes. I made stories. Legends.
Tell me a story. In any language you want.
Hello.
Hi, Dome. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm very good. Very well. I'm in New York, and as I'm actually half American from my father's side, it's always wonderful to be here. A lot of family here.
Well, fantastic. I understand you're a very busy man today, so we'll try not to waste too much of your time. How's it going? How's the press junkets treating you?
It's great. I mean, in the times of superhero movies, it's always, I really appreciate when people want to write about dramas and when journalists do that. So I try to be as servicing and helpful as possible. I mean, we need you guys. As drama directors, we really need you guys.
Well, I mean, you've obviously chosen a subject that's very interesting and difficult to tackle. So clearly, it's something we want to hear about. Your movie Tolkien by Fox Searchlight is debuting tomorrow, correct?
Yes, it debates tomorrow in UK and then in Finland. So we start with
awesome.
UK and Finland, kind of the countries of the author and the director, and then on May 10th, America and the rest of the world, slowly and slowly. I think there's still, like in fall, there's a couple of countries coming in the fall. People like to release films in the summer.
Well, you have made, from what I've seen so far, just a visually compelling and striking movie. And I got to say, it definitely looks beautiful. I'm definitely going to park my butt in the seat to go check it out. I mean, really, it looks amazing.
Thank you.
Well, when you started this, obviously...
Go ahead and ask a question regarding that.
Oh, no, I was saying when you started this, it was obviously a passion project because you've thrown a lot into this. I mean, just a tremendous effort to get this made.
Yes, and I think that's part of it. It is true because I've been a fan since the age of 12, 13, and having the privilege of reading the books before films. I mean, there was an animation, but at that time, in the Finnish village I lived in, it was impossible to find the VHS and all of that. So I actually saw that probably 10, 15 years later after I had read the books. And, so when you're privileged enough to read the books before any films, any visualization, and also, it's the time before internet, so you can't Google, hey, what does an elven prince look like, or what does, a troll look like? So you have to imagine it yourself. So in that sense, it is fun in a way. You're able to create some of those worlds in this film. My own vision of certain, Middle Earth elements or his mythological elements, and to be actually accurate, they are not, of course, that yet. As a film, you haven't seen it, but it tells us the story of his younger years. He hasn't written anything yet. He hasn't written The Hobbit yet. He hasn't written The Lord of the Rings. He hasn't written The Fall of Gondolin, which is probably his most likely first one with the story of Kullervo. So, you have to we are visualizing a time how his imagination sees it before he actually writes it. So that's
right.
I felt like a wonderful challenge.
Well, yeah, you're taking us on this journey from a young man who comes from humble beginnings, to say the least. Clearly he had some issues, some troubles he met growing up, which I'm sure you're going to present in the movie all the way through. Basically he goes through what has been described by historians as hell on earth, and one of the most complex and messy military offensives in the history of the world.
This is true, and I was actually quite surprised. I mean, having read the books at a young age, then you read an interview or you maybe perhaps an interview, the kind of a characterization of him from the Finnish local newspaper, and they always tell the same story about Inklings and C.S. Lewis, and your image becomes this Oxford gentleman who's smoking a pipe and drinking a pint in a pub in Eagle and Child in Oxford debating about elves. So that's your kind of visual image when you're growing up with his books, and then suddenly story, reading about the story of his younger years, he was orphaned at a very young age. Then, he has to move. He basically becomes an outsider. He wants tremendously find a belonging, and then meeting another orphan girl, and kind of these two orphans forming this unity, this pack, and this amazing love story. And then how important those friends and the friendships and certain clubs became in his life. And you understand, like, now I understand, if I go back to the books, when I reread them, you understand in a deep emotional level the layers that are behind those stories that he's experienced, and he's putting those dark times into those stories. And I'm not saying that they were inspiring him, because I think most of his inspirations were deriving other mythologies, but I would say that they shaped him so much that I can hear his voice even more clearly in those books now when I, as a fan, read them.
Well, you speak of the mythologies, and it's amazing, someone who was such a devout Catholic that actually, demanded that his wife convert from Protestantism when it was such a huge thing to Catholicism would derive so much from the North and some of the fairy mythology. It's just really just an amazing transition of element in storytelling. And some of that was inspired by some of his travels, correct?
Correct. The good thing and the tricky thing about making a film like this, he himself said that they weren't really direct inspirations. There's a couple that he's named. Like, we were talking about the travels. He was traveling in the mountains in continental Europe, and then he met this image of a Bergheist, this kind of spirit of a mountain, and that kind of inspired him the character of Gandalf. So there are a couple that he's mentioned, like 101s, especially because we are not actually showing the time of Lord of the Rings, and Lord of the Rings is most likely his most Catholic work, and very, very kind of inherently Catholic work. But we're not showing that time. We're showing we're showing a much younger time in his life, where he's not yet even writing that. And I think he also himself actually said that he was, when he was a younger man, which is totally normal, that he was a bit of a bad Catholic, which is especially his Oxford time. He was which is at the time, in college, and and you focus more on, as he himself said, being a bit merry rather than necessarily going to church on Sunday and that type. So I understand that as a young man, but it's difficult, like, inherently showing like these inspirations. Like, how do you visualize that? And I chose a path where I wanted to show how his imagination builds. There's all the elements in the film. He has a very, very fond and close relationship with Father Francis. So you can show kind of the effect and importance of religion through Father Francis. Not necessarily like that you don't have a scene that he's praying at the cross and then he starts writing Lord of the Rings, because we were not depicted at that time. The same thing, right. His images in war or his experiences in war, there's not direct allegory. You might have seen on the trailer, like, we see a dragon and flamethrowers, but it's not actually, that's more like a visual playfulness in the film. Actually, the dragon is it's not like saying that flamethrowers are dragons. When you see the film, it's more obvious. It's more like dragon is inherently the biggest fear you confront in life. That's a mythology. In the mythological sense, dragons are often that. They are and in the film, he's confronting his biggest fears of losing a friend, losing a love, and then, in a way, in the mythological sense, he experiences the emotion of the dragon. So it's really, we're playing kind of in a very, very subtle, and you could say a challenging environment, how to open up his imagination in the film so you understand more about him.
Right, using the dragon as an archetype conveys that in that particular visual sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. I had one more question, because I don't want to keep you too long. You're busy, man, but I have to know, how important was the use of mud in the trenches in your story? Because it so clearly factors into especially the Lord of the Rings trilogy, with all of these terrible things coming from the mud and the ground and the iron. Did that play visually into your film as well?
Not that much. I mean, it's more actually, I think we're actually using more elements of The Hobbit, because that's his first published work. So Lord of the Rings came so much later. The film ends in the 30s, and so it's almost 20 years later when he released and wrote The Lord of the Rings. So we're more focused on the inspirational elements of The Hobbit and also the Silmarillion, because he kept on writing the stories of Silmarillion started writing them at a very young age. That's the Fall of Gondor, and he started writing, which is part of the Silmarillion, in post post-war. He started writing immediately in the hospital. So it's less about the Lord of the Rings in that sense, but it's more about entirely his mythology. So, for instance, regarding the war, it is, of course, it's an experience of mud, and it's experience of man being in dirt. But it's more like a dream in this film. I approach it from a dream perspective, where if he would be dreaming about the war, what would be his emotional feeling, emotional journey? It's inherently emotional journey from it. So it's less about the visuals so much as the protagonist's kind of psychological feeling of and emotion. And I think that is more relevant to then, kind of, how do you say, combining it, understanding it to his books and his work.
So like, I'll tell you have
the audience. You haven't seen the film, but if you see that, just to finish it up, so if you see fantasy elements in the film, they are not yet from any book. They're not yet taken from anything. He's kind of seeing ideas. It's ideas, one idea, second idea. He's using and playing with the ideas in his mind, and then eventually that will be part of his mythologies.
Well, you have done an outstanding job from what I've seen already. Your cast is amazing. You've done just a fantastic job on stacking the deck there on that end. So we cannot wait. And thank you so much for your time today, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a great day, sir.
Have a great day.